Hello, and welcome back to the American Field Trip podcast. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful summer. I guess maybe it's not summer when you're listening to this. It's August right now as we're at time of recording.
This podcast is now brought to you by LL Bean, a longtime sponsor of American Field Trip. We are super happy that they are now on board with us in this podcast.
Yes, we
love them.
We love them. They make excellent boots as you're thinking about your, back to school apparel, fall footwear,
flannels, plaids.
Flannels.
They didn't ask us to say any of this.
No, but
we want to because
they make good flannels.
Looking through LL Bean's site makes me want fall and winter to come, actually.
Yes, it's kind of the only thing that makes me happy about the changing of the seasons at the end of the summer is like,
yep.
Ooh,
flannel.
Cozy things.
Ooh. So today we're going to talk about the least visited national parks in the NPS system. We're covering capital N, capital P parks.
Yes.
The phraseology is always confusing when it comes to national park terminology.
Someday we'll do another episode on that.
Oh, it's a whole thing. There are 63 at time of recording national parks, and we're going to talk about the 10 of those that see the fewest visitors. Mm-hmm. The National Park Service sees an insane number of visitors every year, but 3/4 of those are visiting only 64 of the 425 sites.
We talked a little bit about this in our How to Deal with Crowding episode.
Yeah, that there are plenty of places to go that are seeing relatively few visitors. So we're going to talk about some of those places today. The first up, the least visited in 2022 is...
the National Park of American Samoa.
One of our favorite parks that we visited on our trip when we did all of them.
First, why do you think this is the least visited national park, Maddie?
So I have questions about this one. It's interesting that it is the very least visited because as this top 10 list goes, top 10 least visited, so maybe it's like a bottom 10. Mm-hmm. This is not anywhere near the hardest to get to. Yeah.
And it's not usually at the bottom either in years past.
It has seen fluctuating visitation, but the numbers came down 78% from 2021 to 2022. And there were fewer than 2,000 registered visitors last year. So this is counting recreation visitors. The way that those numbers get counted is varies. But I found this super interesting. And there are years in the last 5 where there have been, almost 70,000 visitors to American Samoa, to the National Park of American Samoa. So
they've gotten a lot of visitors in the past.
And I understand there were a lot of COVID closures for American Samoa. They were very careful about COVID, and Hawaiian Airlines was not running very many flights. Flights to like Ofu and Ta'u were not running for a couple of years.
Yeah. Transportation, I think, was very hard.
Very hard. So I didn't understand why they were so much higher in 2021 than they were in 2022.
I have my guess, and I mean, say something in the comments if you have some real information on this. We read this just before recording and we're like, oh, dang, interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's cruises. I bet a big cruise line quit running a line to there or something like that. Something like that happened.
Yeah. So most visitors to this national park are day visitors from a cruise ship.
Yep.
That are docking in Pongo Pongo for the day.
Yeah.
So they're not getting to see a lot of the national park. Now, reasons that you would want to visit here, David.
Yeah. Oh man. Why? I feel like you gotta really, well, you don't have to reach very far to come up with reasons to not visit. The main reason to not visit is that it's kind of expensive to get down there.
It's
that's
far
like
away.
The main reason, but I think that's kind of the only one, because beyond that, it's incredible. If you like beaches, if you like snorkeling, if you like if you like yourself a tropical beach destination and outdoor recreation, then this is like the ideal combination of those two things.
History, culture, coconut crabs.
It's amazing.
If you're really into bats.
Oh yeah, the bats. I forgot about the bats.
Not that that's like a.
There's
they just have
huge
very
bats.
interesting wildlife.
Flying foxes, like big fruit bats everywhere,
It's
which
really
is
incredible.
bizarre. It's crazy.
And one of the healthiest coral reef systems in the world, a reef that scientists are traveling from all over the world to study because it has proven to be so resilient to warming ocean temperatures. So
Yeah.
the snorkeling there is just off the charts, bananas amazing. So if you are looking for, a very far-flung destination, or if you are listening from Hawaii or the South Pacific,
Yeah.
then
If
it's not that far-flung.
If you live in Samoa, the country, not
Yeah.
American Samoa, then man, it's close to you.
Anyway,
But also you probably know because it's very similar to where you live.
It is a beautiful, incredible, rich place. And
amazing.
ways to get there. Hawaiian Airlines runs a flight twice a week from Honolulu to Pago Pago, which is the main city on the main island. There is a section of national park there, and there's a section of national park on two other islands that are much smaller that you would need to take another little chartered flight to. But they run regular small flights. I mean, people have got to get around these islands, and that is the main way that they do so, and that they get goods to and from places. So there's plenty of flights going, but it's not a big commercial airline that's going to be taking you. So that's the way to get there.
Yeah, or a cruise. Or take a cruise that stops in American Samoa.
Or a cruise, but I would recommend staying longer.
For sure. And if you're going to go there, if you're going to make the effort to get all the way down there, go to Ofu and Olosega, the second little island group that you got to work a little bit harder to get to. It is worth it.
Very cool. So the second least visited, the second and third, I guess we'll just do the second.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about the second and third together a little bit. There's a lot of Alaska coming up. Spoiler there.
5 of these top 10 are in Alaska, which totally makes sense in terms of the U.S., in which all the U.S. national parks are. Alaska is by far the most remote and difficult to visit destination. So the second least visited is Gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve.
Yes.
8.4 million acres of the most stunning geography you've ever seen.
It's amazing.
Like young, like little baby craggy mountains that haven't been
the big baby
worn down yet. Oh, yes, big baby. Sorry, I mean baby in the sense that they are
young, but
they are
very
young
big.
Geologically. They are huge and incredible to look at. Which I guess is getting into the reason that you would want to visit Gates of the Arctic.
Yeah, I think you would want to visit it. There are a few particular activities that are quite good in Gates of the Arctic, and I would imagine probably account for a lot of the visitation. First one is climbing. If you're a climber, Gates of the Arctic has a lot of really unique and very challenging, very exciting routes. The Arrowgetch Peaks is kind of one of the main ones. Go Google the Arrowgetch Peaks. They are crazy, insane, beautiful looking. A lot of really cool like mountaineering and like long backcountry backpacking trips. Everything, and everything up here like is long, extremely remote, extremely advanced. Like you are on your own, very far away. Like if you hit your beacon because you need help, it's going to be like a long time if anyone can come get you, like weather permitting. It's if you're planning a trip there, you probably know all this.
So mountaineering would be a big reason that people visit.
Mountaineering
Pack rafting is another
whitewater rafting
draw for a lot of people, and that would be one way to get into the park if you are very adventurous.
So pack rafting is, if you don't know what pack rafting kind of developed in Alaska.
It's where you pack a raft.
It's a little raft. So it's like a little bitty inflatable kayak that the first time you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, people are rafting crazy rapids in what looks like a pool toy. And it feels a little bit like a pool toy the first time you use it. And many hardcore kayakers will be like, yes, that's a pool toy. But the people that use them for trips that I think it kind of got its start in Gates of the Arctic and a lot of the really remote Alaskan backcountry where you could string together very interesting multi-day backcountry trips by floating a section of a river and then pack up your raft and then hike over the mountain and then float another section of the river. So it basically means that you're not limited to small portages if you're traveling by like a hard kayak or canoe or like a big inflatable raft. You can pack it up, strap it to your backpack, and then go hike over to the next valley and then catch another river. So people do very interesting and exciting. And then if you're at all interested in visiting this area, go do a little research on pack rafting and the people that use them, and you will at least be very entertained, consuming a lot of very cool content.
It's like a rabbit hole on
I was
YouTube that
I was
David
like,
has been
whoa,
down.
I was like, people do what? Like,
David's been deep into
I was
this
like, oh,
sector
this is
of
cool.
the internet. The main way that you would get to Gates of the Arctic, though, would be to fly.
Yep.
To fly in. Just a bush flight.
You fly to probably one of two places. You can fly to Bettles and then do like a flight scene. Like you can fly over the park from Bettles.
Bettles is not in the park, but it
No.
is close to it, and it is where the visitor center is
Yes.
for the park. Well, one of them.
Yeah, it's like where the rangers. There's a Bettles ranger station that kind of covers several sites there. But if you want to get like a stamp and a brochure, you go to the Bettles ranger station. Or at least that's where we got ours.
Tragically, actually, we did not have a passport,
We did not have a passport.
a national parks passport when we went there, so
We
we
didn't.
didn't get a stamp.
The other place you can fly into is Anaktuvuk Pass, which is a city or it's a little town that is inside the park.
They have a little museum there
Yeah.
that is fantastic. That has, it's
It's a very cool museum.
really well done.
Yeah.
And a real labor of love for some citizens there in Anaktuvuk Pass. And there's a ranger who lives in a little house.
There's
and
a ranger
technically
station.
It's technically a ranger station.
It's mostly just like his apartment.
It's mostly just a guy, and then you walk into his house, and he's like, "Oh, hey."
Oh, a visitor.
A comfy way to go see the park would be to go with one of, I shouldn't say many, but there are several companies that specialize in doing tours to these, more remote national parks. They can do a flight seeing tour or
Yeah.
can land you briefly.
There's some private lodges inside the park.
Yeah, there's a lot of options for visiting, but they are mostly really expensive due to just the lack of resources.
It's very
up there for this kind of
logistically
things.
complicated.
Yeah,
A lot of flights.
It's remote. It's remote, so it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
So we flew in and stayed in Anaktuvuk Pass, and we're able to, hang out on the ground there for a little bit, do a little bit of hiking, and then and fly around and see some of the rivers and some of the range from above, which was incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
Also, time-wise, I mean, there's a very short season of time in which you can see a lot of these Alaskan parks. So that also contributes to visitation, although, I mean, it's already so remote, but it does factor in that primarily people only visit for a couple of months in the summer. We went at the end of August, and it was already full on fall.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Which is a pretty time to visit if you can time it right.
it's gorgeous.
The fall foliage is, the mountains are orange.
Anyway, the third least visited national park is Kobuk Valley,
Yes.
which is south and west of Gates of the Arctic, and is, again, stunning.
Kobuk Valley, I think the biggest reason for why this one is on the sort of in the bottom 10 is logistics. It's very hard to get there. There are no roads going into the park yet, although there is a pretty controversial plan to potentially build a road into Ambler, which is very near the park. Which is if you're interested in land use issues, you go look at the Ambler Road and all of the stuff around that. But it's hard to get to, so you got to fly and then usually take a boat of some kind. The big draw for Kobuk Valley, so why you would want to visit it, is usually two things. The first is the Kobuk Valley sand dunes, which are like a crazy geological Easter egg hiding out there in the Alaskan tundra. Is like, oh, there's a sand dune field, like a big one, like
Yeah.
a really big sand dune field in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness, and it's surreal and very cool. And there's a lot of scientific geological research and stuff going on there. There's also a lot of like archaeologic sites within the park of like ancient like some of the earliest human fossils they have found. Like this is the area where you get anthropologists studying people that they think came over the Bering Land Bridge, and they're finding old sites of villages and stuff from just way long ago. It's very old, so it's unique for a bunch of reasons.
As a visitor, those are not sites that you're going to be able to visit.
No.
As a person who is interested in things, if you go there, that would be something to look into and learn about, just to help you appreciate the area more.
And you'll learn about it. Like it's in the brochure. They'll tell you about it.
But Kobuk Valley, I mean, there's not. I don't think for your average traveler that Kobuk Valley is a place that most people would have on their list.
No.
If they are not super into visiting all the national parks.
Well, the other reason, and number two, so the first of the second of the two reasons why you might go there is fishing. So Kobuk Valley and actually a lot of the surrounding wilderness is a big destination for sport fishermen and hunters. If you're into hunting and fishing, and particularly if you were into fishing for what the locals call she-fish, which I forget. Do you remember what the sign is? It is like the place. Like if you want to catch a record-breaking she-fish, you go to Kobuk Valley. And so when we were there, it was like us and a lot of fishermen. So people that are on like guided fishing trips and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that guide you to go fish in Kobuk Valley. And it's beautiful. There's beautiful rivers and like a very unique fishing experience. Like you'll be fishing and you'll see, bears and wolves and all sorts of wildlife.
I mean, that's not that unique in Alaska.
I mean, it's unique if you're not from Alaska.
Yes.
If you're from the lower 48 and want to go have a cool wilderness fishing experience, then
it's pretty niche. It's pretty niche. I can for sure see why Kobuk Valley is perpetually among usually the top 3 least visited.
Yeah.
Parks.
If it wasn't so hard to get to, a lot of people would probably go there.
Sure.
But it's very hard to get to.
And that's probably its appeal for a lot of the people that do go.
Yeah.
There were almost 17,000 visitors in 2022.
And for comparison, that's like almost twice as many as went to Gates of the Arctic.
Moving on to the next Alaskan park also. Yeah. Number 4 is Lake Clark National Park and Preserve.
Why do few people go there?
Lake Clark is absolutely stunning. One of the most beautiful areas I've ever been in. It is difficult to get to. It's not as difficult to get to as Kobuk Valley or Gates of the Arctic because it is not that far from Anchorage. So there are quite a few Bush aircraft services.
Comparatively speaking, it's a shorter flight.
That will take you there.
Yeah. There's some more established towns there. So Port Allsworth is a lovely little town that has like nice cabin rentals and like it's there's some better landing spots than some of these other parks that really are like
we for sure saw in Lake Clark and Katmai, which are very near to each other. We definitely saw a lot more people from Alaska who were there on vacation.
Yeah.
Versus in Gates and Kobuk where we, saw almost nobody that didn't live in those places.
And you were more likely in terms of like tourists, you were more likely to see someone from like Switzerland than you were to see someone from Fairbanks.
Yeah.
I think the draw is kind of international. Whereas like if someone from Fairbanks is really into hunting or fishing, like Lake Clark is a cool destination.
So Lake Clark is number 4. I want to skip ahead to number 7 is Katmai National Park and Preserve, which is also very remote, but has a huge draw in that it is one of the most established great place. I don't want to say the best places, but it's one of the most established great places to watch bears hunting for salmon. It is the infrastructure is not, vast, but it is set up perfectly at Brooks Camp to do that thing. And it is a very famous place to watch bears. So
it's kind of the place to do it.
Yeah.
If you want to do it reliably and safely, you can do it there. 33.9 thousand recreation visits last year. And that tracks. It's a short season. The bears are primarily fishing in July and September. When you schedule your visit, it's kind of dicey in terms of when the bears are actually going to show up at the falls. They are not scheduled in their appearances. Yeah. And it depends very much on what the salmon run is like and what the winter was like and many other things. There's an element of chance, but
as always with Alaska,
it's as reliable here as it is anywhere. An element of chance.
Anyway, so I compare Lake Clark and Katmai because they're geographically near to each other, but Katmai sees almost twice as many visitors because it has a very famous specific draw. You can also see bears in Lake Clark.
Oh, yeah.
But you don't know where you're going to find them. So you would need a pilot that is a pilot that knows where to look and can land you near to the bears in Lake Clark, which there are people that do that.
You can definitely get that. It's readily available.
It's just a very different experience than Katmai, where you're staying at camp. There's for sure bears all around when you're there in season.
Yeah.
And,
And they don't have like a lodge with a salad bar and like
in Lake Clark.
In Lake Clark, yeah. Katmai does.
They used to have a restaurant. They didn't when we were there, but maybe they do again.
In Port Ellsworth? Maybe Port Ellsworth's got a restaurant.
Anyway, they're both incredible places to visit, but just very different in terms of your goal, probably, in going there. Lake Clark is absolutely stunning, has beautiful rivers, beautiful lakes, a lot of great hiking, and it is, again, extremely remote and undeveloped.
But it's different than Gates and Kobuk.
In terms of undeveloped in terms of traveler infrastructure.
Yeah.
There are obviously
but there's more
ancient cultureways. But there are more resources if you are a visitor in Katmai, if you're comparing the two.
Yes. And I think that Lake Clark and Katmai also, like, they have trails. Like, if you want to go and stay and like go for a hike, there's like a trail with a map, and the ranger will tell you.
There's full visitor center in both places.
Yes.
There, if you are there in the
there
summer.
are visitor services like of any form, whereas Kobuk and Gates really not. Like, they're just bare bones. There are no established trails in either park. So it's very like, if that's what you're looking for, that's your place. You can also get that in Lake Clark, but if you want to go like stay in a beautiful place and go for a hike and have a cool trip, Katmai and Lake Clark have a little bit more for you.
While we're in the weeds with Alaska, can we hop down to number 8, which is Wrangell St. Elias?
A lot of this episode is going to be just like talking about the details of Alaska, which I love.
When we were trying to visit all of the parks, Alaskas were for sure the most baffling to wrap your mind around. How do we get to this place? And what do we do if we're there? Is there any reason to go here other than to just kind of ogle it and then say that we went? And maybe there's not, that's fine.
I mean, the most fun I've had trip planning was planning Gates and Kobuk, because you literally are like reading trip reports from like backpackers and adventurers and like looking at topo maps.
Yeah, it's not like
planning
you can
your route.
Get like the Lonely Planet guide to either of these places.
Literally topo maps and like satellite imagery and stuff.
Yeah, although if you are not into that and you have a lot of money, there are great ways to visit.
There are great guides. There's a lot of really good guides that'll show you a good time.
You must have good cash flow.
But if you like that, like me, where you're just like, oh man, this is truly open ended. It's fun. Which you don't even have to visit it to get that fun. Just plan the trip.
You know where you don't have to have good cash flow to go in Alaska? Wrangell St. Elias.
Yes.
You just drive right into that sucker.
You need good tires and a spare tire.
And
maybe 4-wheel drive.
A little bit of mechanical know-how will help you out. But yeah, you can drive right in. Wrangell St. Elias is the biggest national park in the United States.
Yep.
It's also geographically. It's also, well, what other way would you measure bigness?
I don't know. I guess that is probably the only way.
The other thing is that it's contiguous with a national park in Canada. So
Kluane.
It's on the border. So overall, that preserved area is enormous.
It's just big.
So you're not going to be able to see a lot of it.
No.
Like any which way. Even if you're flight seeing, like you're not going to be able to see very much of this park. So where you can go to easily in the park is the town of McCarthy, which you can drive right into. Yes. Not easily.
But you can drive there.
But it is a road. It is well traveled.
To follow our little rubric here, why do you think this park is in the bottom 10?
Oh, it's still remote. I mean, Alaska is very far away. Yep. And unlike Denali, which has a big draw in that it has Denali.
Yeah, like cruise ships bus passengers into Denali.
Yeah, I mean that some of the other Alaskan parks are, like Kenai Fjords is very close to civilization, and it's just much easier to visit. Wrangell,
a long drive.
You can drive into Wrangell, but it is a very difficult drive to get into the park in that the road is not good. And they can't really, I mean, they maintain the road a bit. It's maintained.
It is. It's a real road. It's maintained.
A real road. It's a
road.
maintained road, but it is rough in that
it's literally rough.
It's just hard to keep a road up in Alaska
Yes.
because frost heaves and it's just like
so the road
way out there.
The McCarthy Road, it's a 50-mile gravel road. And it is it's a good 50-mile gravel road. It is very washboarded.
How long did it take us to drive it in our bus?
Time, a surprisingly long time. And they will tell you this going in. It was like, do not expect that 50 miles.
Many hours. How many hours?
Several hours. Like I would have to go back and check the notes and stuff.
I feel like it was like 5 hours.
It was like 4 or 5 hours, honestly, because you're driving. Like to give you a picture, we were driving down this road and truly most of it is washboarded, at least when we visited, and I know they grade it and they try and maintain it, but it's very large and very remote, and they will also have situations where it'll get washed out or like there'll be some damage or something like that, and so the road can close sometimes, but when it's open it is just very rough. So you're driving, at least in our bus, we were driving 20 miles an hour the whole time, and it, like if that. Like it might have even been slower than that. So you're just creeping along. It's very bumpy and dusty. They will all tell you bring a spare tire because you can blow a tire. And if you blow a tire out there, you are very much on your own. There is a little bit of traffic on that road. People come and go. But it's a real pain if you get stuck out there. So you can drive into it, which is like a big advantage for an Alaska park because most of them you cannot drive into. But it's a tough drive. It's a long drive.
And at the end of the drive, you can visit the town of McCarthy. You can go to the Kennecott Copper Mines. There's that area that you can drive to is very cool and beautiful. And there are a lot of hikes and things that you can do and see. However, you can see a tiny fraction of the park that way.
But that fraction that you see,
it's
to
very
just like
cool.
Paint a picture of the town of McCarthy, you arrive there. So you like come off of this arduous gravel road and you get into McCarthy and you're at the toe of a glacier. So there's this enormous glacier that runs like up to the town, like truly right up to the town.
Well, this was 6 years ago, so it might not run up
Maybe
to
it's
the town
retreated. I don't know.
anymore.
When we were there, it was right up there. The glacier is very accessible. It's one of the easiest places to like go hike on a glacier. If you want to go do like technical ice climbing, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, there are guide services in McCarthy that will take you and go teach you that stuff, which is super cool.
We did a guided tour of the copper mine, which was really cool and interesting.
It's historic.
There are the town has a couple of good little like cafe situations. I just remember there being like a lot of.
It's a cute little town.
Yeah, like rubber trampers there that were like, I don't know. It was a vibe.
It's legitimately like really cute, like a little
cute.
mountain vacation kind of town. But you know what you might find in like Colorado or like a mountain town here,
but
in the States,
much smaller. Much smaller. There are also a couple of great flight seeing companies that are based there. We ended up doing a little flight seeing tour, and which I really loved being able to do that alongside the stuff we did around McCarthy and driving in on the McCarthy Road because the park is so vast and you really don't get to see a lot of the geography of it unless you get up in the air.
Yeah.
There are so many glaciers. It's really stunning. And the braided glacial rivers. I mean, that for me is worth the price of admission alone. Not that I think it's free. I don't think there's an entrance fee.
No, there's not for Wrangell, but the flight costs.
Yeah, I mean, it's
You gotta pay for the flight.
getting there is expensive, but so that would be for me the primary reason to visit would be because it's one of the most beautiful places I think in the world.
It's amazing.
It's absolutely stunning.
That's pretty true of all the Alaska parks.
Yeah, but I do feel like for me, scenery wise, Wrangell was one of my favorites.
Yeah, Wrangell
was one
was
of
very
my
notable.
top of the Alaskan parks.
Yeah. And we do suggest, like, to everyone who asks if it's worth it to do a flight scene tour or something like that while you're in Alaska. If you are in Alaska, you will be missing a large portion of the experience if you don't take a small airplane flight. Like, if you go take a bush flight, whether you're just getting to a place or going on a flight scene tour, I think you'll you'll see pictures of that later and be like, oh my gosh, I missed it. Like, it's worth saving up for. It's worth prioritizing. Just do one. Like,
flight culture in Alaska is very different. Like, coming from the lower 48, that was weird for me. That's how you get around up there. That people are like, flying is so normal and common, and that is how people get around and how they get their stuff to them, and that's just like, it's super, super normal. And I was very nervous about flying on a small plane, but it is just like a huge part of the Alaskan experience. And
like, safety wise, honestly, like if I'm going to fly in a small airplane, I want to do it in Alaska because all of the pilots there are flying every single day all over the place. Like,
if you get in a plane crash in Alaska.
I mean, it's, there are risks involved, but for sure, like, all of the, I've had very good experiences and felt extremely safe.
Yeah. It's
flying experience in Alaska.
It's the road well traveled in Alaska. Yeah, it's routine. It's a routine part of the experience. And with that, it's not as expensive as I feel like that might be in other area. Like, flight seeing in Alaska, when we did it, and the places that we did it were less expensive than flight seeing over like the Grand Canyon or in other places that we've visited where it's like a comparable time frame and everything. Because it's, such a normal part of the way that people get around there.
And also, some of your travel to get to your place can be part of the experience. So like, if you're
so
flying
beautiful
into
everywhere.
One of these parks, if you're flying into any of these parks, you're doing it in a bush plane, and that alone is going to be a highlight of the visit. Just seeing that as you fly in is incredible.
Okay, so
Anyways,
we've gone deep into Alaska.
Enough Alaska.
We really, really love Alaska.
Let's talk about something. We really love Alaska.
All right, so we got American Samoa. We got 3 Alaska parks. That rounds out our top 4. Our fifth least visited national park in the U.S. is Isle Royale in Michigan.
Show of hands, who's ever heard of Isle Royale?
Isle Royale is, I feel like even when we were in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, there were people who were like, "You're going where? What are you doing now?"
They all knew, but they were like, "Oh yeah, Isle Royale." Like, it was not a lot of people go there, as evidenced by its presence on this list.
It is a very small island in the middle of Lake Superior. Just surrounded by
remote.
Water. It's very remote. Not a ton of people can visit it for infrastructure reasons. More people can go for the day on the ferry, which is how we visited it. We would have loved to stay longer, but there's not a lot of space to stay and camp. There are, little cabins out there, and there's some lodging.
There's like the sort of main harbor has lodge. They have some cabin rentals. There's an established campground there. And then everything else is mostly backcountry campsites. There are a few backcountry cabins. There's a lot of backcountry campsites for paddling trips. So if you are in canoe or kayak, there's little kind of like docking areas where you can then camp on the shore.
And this seems to be the main category of people that is familiar with Isle Royale are paddlers. People who have spent a lot of time in like the Boundary Waters. This is another destination where you can paddle around the island and have a really, it sounds like a really stunning trip. I also, because you can stay so close to the island, you don't need to be a real advanced paddler in order to be able to do that kind of trip. Yeah.
It's not like you're sea kayaking in the open ocean or anything, or it's, it is a large body of water.
Know what you're doing. Yeah. I'm not saying that it's like, but I would feel comfortable doing that with like our level of skill, which is not high.
It's fairly accessible in terms of, cool multi-day paddling trips. It's a good place for that.
Mm-hmm. So the way that most visitors get there is by ferry. Mm-hmm. You can go from either Minnesota or from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I think, the season...
It's shorter from Michigan. Shorter trip from Michigan.
Is it?
Or no, sorry, shorter trip from Minnesota.
Shorter from Minnesota.
From the Upper Peninsula, you got to cross most of the lake.
We ended up going from Michigan because of the timing and just where we could get a spot on the ferry.
Check the schedules. We
This
didn't
is-
and had to catch the last ferry of the season from the Upper
Literally
Peninsula.
the last
It was the last one.
The timing on that is really important, and if you're planning a trip there, you will probably look into this.
Yeah.
Like we didn't, but it's a pretty short season.
Yeah.
For weather reasons.
It was a wild time of our lives.
Yeah, we were-
we weren't thinking a whole lot.
We were flying by the seat
we
of our
were just
pants.
going.
But yeah, the season is fairly short. And that's probably a factor in why there aren't that many visitors. 25,000, 25,500
Short season.
recreation visitors.
Pretty remote.
It's pretty remote. I mean, these are not like huge population centers around this area that would be going to visit there.
Yep.
And I think there are a lot of, in the Great Lakes region, there are comparable trips in terms of like lake and island things and the
Yeah.
scenery, places that are easier to get to that kind of have a similar feel. So if you're not super into national parks, I can see why this isn't like a massive draw for,
Yeah.
millions of visitors.
You can do similar things in more accessible places, but
it's very cool.
very
We
cool.
loved it. It's beautiful. There's only like 18 mammal species that live on Isle
Yeah.
Royale because
all the biology is really interesting.
it's so remote and because it's all got to be animals that either walked there when it was completely frozen over or have swum.
Google the moose wolf
Swim there?
study. It's the longest running wildlife research study like ever. Like it's the longest running one. They've been studying the moose and wolf population and their interactions.
It's super,
Forever.
super interesting. We loved it there. It was gorgeous, even though we only went for the day. For a day trip, I will say the ferry is quite expensive.
Most of your days on the ferry.
Most of your days on the ferry, and it's not crazy pricey, but it's pretty pricey.
It's expensive.
for like
It's a long ferry ride.
for a day trip. So if
Yeah.
you can stay, do.
Yeah.
You can also get there by seaplane, although I think that's
Ferry's
that's
probably
less
more economical.
The ferry's more economical, and I don't remember seeing a lot of seaplanes when we were there.
No, I think you can do it, but most people get there by ferry.
Anyway, again, if you have a lot of money, I mean,
Sure.
it's like you can do whatever you want.
Do
but-
it. Take the seaplane.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Um,
But especially if you're in the upper Midwest, I think Isle Royale is incredibly worth visiting to learn about the really unique ecology, has interesting human history. It's a very interesting place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
And beautiful.
And for comparison, we skipped around on our numbering a little bit. So this Isle Royale is actually number 5. It's the number 5 least visited.
Yeah, we did all the Alaska.
We combined Alaska.
Anyway.
And so this gets fewer visitors than Katmai or Wrangell St. Elias.
Yep.
25.
I said 25,500.
Yeah.
And it's very small.
It's small and it's I would say this is probably the most remote place in the lower 48 that we visited.
You think so?
I think it probably is.
More than Dry
Challenge me on
Tortugas?
that. Maybe Dry Tortugas. This felt more remote than Dry Tortugas did.
It's out there.
It's very remote.
far out there.
It's like list of places, like most remote spots in the lower 48. Isle Royale is on most of those lists, I would imagine.
I don't know.
If you really want to get away, it's a good getaway.
The 6th least visited national park is North Cascades, a national park. Now,
This was interesting.
in Washington. This one, this is interesting. 30,000 visitors in 2022. Not that far away from large population centers like Seattle. It's a ways, 3-4 hour drive from Seattle.
Yeah, but that's not that far.
That's not that far.
Seattle's
If you
huge.
live in the West, maybe if you're an East Coaster, you'd be like, 4 hours, I can see what. But no, the West is massive. You have to drive 5 hours to get to Costco. So I don't understand why more people aren't visiting North Cascades.
And I have a hypothesis about this, which is that a highway runs through North Cascades. So if you're traveling from the coast into a lot of the sort of destinations like in the Cascades, like a lot of the little fun like tourist towns and stuff that are up in the mountains, a lot of the directions will take you through the highway that runs through North Cascades. And I don't think they count those people as visitors.
That don't stop.
And it is one of those parks where I think that you can drive that highway and see a lot of the North Cascades and be like, cool, I saw North Cascades and never stop.
But I mean, who doesn't stop and take a picture of the like the bluest
I know.
lake you've ever.
And this is where I wonder how they gather their data.
Yeah.
I got questions about the methodology.
Well, we were reading about Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Ohio is in the top 10 most visited for 2022. We were wondering about that because I-80 passes right through the park, like literally
It goes right through the
over
park.
top of the park
Yeah.
via bridge. So we were wondering, is that, well, I mean, but then it
They
seemed
can't
like
count I-80.
they can't count I-80. That
'Cause
would be
that's so
way
many
more
people.
than that.
It would be the most visited.
So we learned that they have counters based on the parking, like who is parked in the parking
Yeah.
lot.
They're
That's
like-
what they count.
Yeah.
So I don't know
And
if
entrance
that
stations. Like
and entrance
if you
stations.
paid to enter.
I don't know if that's the same. And although Cuyahoga Valley is free,
Cuyahoga Valley's free.
But
North Cascades, I don't believe has an entrance station.
I don't think
Again,
so.
because the highway, there's just a public highway that runs through the middle.
So with all of these, we've gone through kind of like, well, why don't a ton of people visit it? North Cascades, I honestly can't say. I
Yeah.
mean, it's much more off the beaten track than Mount Rainier or Olympic, which are the other national parks in Washington. There are fewer draws, I guess, in terms of those parks are very varied. They have a lot of different kinds of, I mean, especially Olympic has a lot of different ecosystems in one park, which is one of the most interesting things about it. But North Cascades is
Maybe it's a marketing problem. It just doesn't have a hook.
North Cascades is mountainy and there's amazing
Yes.
hiking to be done up there. There's a lot of intense hiking to be done up there. I mean, if you are into mountaineering or multi-day backpacking trips at all, that would be an incredible destination.
It's a place where a lot of people train to then go do mountains in Alaska or in other places. Like it's a good, more accessible training location for like big mountain expeditions. So a lot of people go there to climb the mountains.
The mountains are very young. The Cascade Mountains are a very young range, so they're very
dramatic.
steep and craggy and dramatic and beautiful. I mean, the scenery is incredible. Along with Glacier National Park, I'd say that though it is the closest you can get to Alaska geography without in the lower 48.
Lower 48.
So I mean, I think it's
Unless you want to drive over the border. to
maybe
Canada.
it just gets overlooked. Maybe it is a marketing.
I kind of think it's the everyone's sleeping on North Cascades, and all you Washingtonians go take a hike. It's
I
pretty
don't
sweet.
want people who go there and like having it
like,
more or
"Don't
less to
tell them.
themselves be
Don't
mad
tell
at
them
us.
it's good.
But it does seem super worth.
It's really
getting to.
good. It's pretty cool.
Also, on your way there, there's a bunch of cute little. There's a ton of vineyards around there, and B, a couple of cute little like scenic towns. One that is
Leavenworth, the little like
Leavenworth
Alpen
is
town.
the little it's like a German thing.
It looks like a Swiss. It's been like built like Disney World to look like a Swiss town in the Alps. Super cute.
cutest place. And then there's I can't remember the name of the very Western themed town where we
I forgot about the day. We stayed there.
Anyway, North Cascades, don't sleep on it. It's beautiful.
It's really good.
And then 7 is Katmai, 8 is Wrangell Elias, 9 is Dry Tortugas National
Yes.
Park in Florida. This is off the Florida Keys, not Kokomo, but Dry Tortugas. There is a fort out there, way out there for strategic reasons. There's a fort. There's a little connected island.
A historic fort, not an actual modern.
Not
day
a
one.
working
It's a
fort.
Civil War era fort.
And Fort Jefferson. It totally makes sense that it's not super well visited. Although if you go, you will not be by yourself. There are a fair number of other visitors that will ride out on the boat with you and will be there with you all day. And then if you can get a camping spot, those usually fill up, and there's like
immediately. We
5 or
tried.
6 camping spots or something.
If you can snag one, good for you. Do it. Like do whatever you can to use that reservation because it looks amazing.
The keys that you can visit are itty bitty, so you're not going to be by yourself. This is not like a least visited park that's going to feel, like you've got it.
It feels super remote, but you're there with like the 30 other people that came on the boat with you. And there's nowhere to go. It's like it's a little tiny island, so you're with them all day.
Yeah. But what you can do, and the reasons that I would recommend visiting are because it's just freaking beautiful.
So pretty.
Beautiful.
It's so pretty.
I mean, the keys are incredible. It's really cool to see the fort out there. the
history is very interesting.
the structure itself is really cool and interesting. You can do a historical tour with a ranger, which I would highly recommend doing. If you get all the way out there, you gotta
Do it.
learn about it.
See the fort.
And then most people spend the rest of their day there after doing the tour, snorkeling and swimming. And that's just like the most pleasant way that you can spend an afternoon
It's amazing.
in the world.
We were there for a day trip and we couldn't get a campground, so we just had the day, and it was amazing. It was 10 out of 10. Really good.
10 out of 10.
Would recommend.
So again, it's like, that's a really pricey day trip. For sure would not have done that had we not been trying to visit all of the parks.
Yeah.
For sure would rather spend more time there camping, since you're spending so much to get out there. But all in all, like 100% worth a visit. And
But I think those are the reasons you
I can see
why it's not visited by everybody. Is it's expensive. You really can't stay there for more than a day unless you get one of a very limited number of campgrounds.
it's a long ways out to go.
Yeah.
And I suppose if you're not super into national parks, there are other places in the Keys that
Just go to Key West.
that also have history and also have a similar, beach snorkel situation
Although
going on. So
particularly pristine and very cool.
yeah. So the 10th least visited national park is Great Basin National Park
This
in
was
Nevada.
surprising.
Surprising only because
This is one of our local parks. This one's very close to us in
it is
Utah.
very close to us. This is in eastern Nevada. It is not hard at all to get to. You just
Not at all.
drive there. I mean, it's remote for the lower 48.
Not even. Death Valley's more remote. I feel like a lot of other parks are longer drives to get to them. Even Yellowstone is a longer drive to get out to it.
From a major population center, like from an airport.
Yeah.
I think from Salt Lake,
Yeah.
from the Salt Lake airport, Yellowstone and Great Basin are probably similar.
Maybe they're equidistant. I don't know.
I will say though that again, it might be a marketing issue
Yeah.
with Great
They don't have as much of a
Basin.
hook.
It's just that
They kind of do though. There's a lot of cool stuff there.
There's a lot of really cool stuff, and there's a lot of people that are big fans of it. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with the park at all, but it's just not one that a lot of people have heard of. I think.
Well, tell the
And
people
even
what
local
it's
people.
got. Tell them what it's got.
So Great Basin is has mountains.
Yeah,
has
so
a mountain
There's Wheeler Peak, which
Wheeler Peak.
is it the tallest mountain in Nevada?
probably.
I think it is the tallest mountain in Nevada. Correct me if I'm wrong. I am fairly certain. Google it quickly. I'm pretty sure it's the tallest mountain in Nevada.
Montgomery Peak. It's tall. Wheeler Peak.
Oh, Wheeler Peak. Sorry,
Wheeler Peak's
third. It's the third highest.
but it's like 400 feet smaller than the highest. Wheeler Peak
And
is
it's 13,000 feet. So it's notably it's tall objectively in the spectrum of all the mountains. Outside of Colorado, it's a very tall mountain. So people go to climb it. It's breathtakingly beautiful. There's a cave that's really cool, Lehman Cave.
Lehman Caves is really cool.
Which is kind of unexpected to see those two things together. You've got big alpine park, also desert because it's in the middle of the desert, but it's like a I don't think they say it's a sky island like they do in sort of the Arizona desert and stuff, but it's surrounded by salt playa and just desolate desert.
it
And
for
then
sure
it goes
sticks out. Yeah.
And you get trees and creeks and
Yeah, there's a lot of really
wildlife
beautiful
and-
hikes, and a lot of as you go up the mountain, there is a lot of very different ecology
It's a
happening
dramatic
all
rise.
along this rise. And you can drive all the way to, not quite all the way to the top of Wheeler Peak, but you can drive very high, almost to the top of
A
Wheeler
drive
Peak.
to the trailhead to hike Wheeler Peak takes you up thousands of feet because I
Yeah.
think the visitor center in the town of is it Butler? Is it Butler?
Baker?
Baker. The town of Baker, which is the little gateway town, is many thousands of feet lower. So it's a very big rise from the base to the summit because it's so prominent in its surroundings.
I will say, rural Nevada is probably not a place that draws a lot of tourists in general. That's why
I really like rural Nevada.
I really like
personally.
it too. I really, really like
But
it.
I dig that kind of landscape. I like a big open
Yeah.
landscape, which that's what they got there.
142,000 visitors last year in 2022. I mean, it kind of tracks. The season is very short in terms of when most people visit it.
It's a summertime park.
You can visit it all year round. It's not like the road to it closes. It doesn't become inaccessible.
Yeah. But the peak
at the
does.
bottom. The peak
bottom,
for
you're
sure
okay, yeah.
does. And so there aren't as many reasons to visit in the winter. And then the summer season is pretty short in this area. I mean, this is high desert. So
It's late summer when you visit.
you got intense seasons going on, and the snow doesn't melt on Wheeler Peak, sometimes, some years ever, but for sure until, July, August, probably solidly August.
Yeah.
So the road is not all the way accessible for most of the year. And yeah, I mean, I think that this just isn't something that's drawing people from super far away. I guess what surprises me is that we're fairly local to Great Basin in the sense that we live in northern Utah. It's very easy for us to get there. And I never hear people talking about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like it's not really a destination for locals. I mean, we're like 5 hours away, so that's not super local. But again, it's the West.
But
everything is far away.
Like lots of people from where we live drive to southern Utah. Like they'll drive to Moab. They'll go on vacation to southern Utah, which is a similar length drive. The only difference is you go if you're going to Great Basin, you hang a right when you're about halfway down. Instead of continuing on to the Red Rock Desert, you turn right and you head off towards Nevada.
There's a lot more to do in Moab.
There is.
And St. George than there is.
There's a lot more to do, but there's also
and there's a lot more.
Have you been to Moab lately? Moab's amazing, but it's like it is mobbed in like the high season now.
So that I think is the coolest thing about Great Basin is that it's out there. It's in a very rural area. And it is not well visited at all. I mean, for sure, you will see other visitors there. This isn't like a place where you're going to be the only person again. No. But in the summer season, there are plenty of people. But it's not. Yeah, it's not a situation that you get in other.
There's a cute little motel.
Well-populated areas.
There's like a legit good restaurant there. When we visited, there was like actually a legitimately really good restaurant in Baker that was run by a couple who moved from Brooklyn and like opened like this really nice brunchy little restaurant that
delicious. We have to see if that survived COVID.
I hope it's still there.
I'd go back just for the orange juice.
It was really
good. So it feels very low key, and that's really nice. If you're a recreator from Utah, it's nice to have a low key area to recreate because that is such a popular thing to do, and it can be really hard to find a destination that doesn't feel overrun, or even that logistically like you can go to without a lot of advanced planning. Mm-hmm. So, and then I would think the number one reason for me to visit Great Basin would be that it is an international dark sky park. And while there are more and more park sites that are meeting the guidelines to become an international dark sky park, even since we started our trip in 2017, more parks are joining that list, which is awesome. I love it. But Great Basin, I feel like is just
it's very dark.
It's way out there.
Yeah,
it's way out there. There are not a lot of population centers anywhere around, so it is dark and it is high desert again. So you're not getting like some of the weather that you get in some of the other dark sky preserves.
Are very clear.
So it is a really, really, really incredible place to go look at the stars. And they do, as in, I think all of the places that are dark sky preserves, all of the parks, they do astronomy ranger programs.
Yeah.
It is absolutely worth timing your visit to catch one of those because they'll have a telescope there and you'll be able to really level up your experience if you do that.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Anyway, so those are the 10 least visited parks in the National Park System, and a little bit about them, a little bit about how to get there if you want to visit them. There's a lot about Alaska.
A lot about Alaska, but it's a lot of Alaska on this list.
Yeah.
Read them to us one more time down the top from just...
Okay, so we've got American Samoa, number 1. I got to scroll back up. Gates of the Arctic, Kobuk Valley, Lake Clark, Isle Royal, North Cascades, Katmai, Wrangell St. Elias, Dry Tortugas, and Great Basin.
Yeah.
And then just like a little ways down the list, because our list keeps going, but there's a lot of places that are pretty near some big population centers like Pinnacles National Park in California that like I can't believe that more people don't go there.
If you live in the Central Valley or like
I guess all this is a plug for like, although a lot of the places that we talked about today are legitimately just really insanely hard to get to, and that's why they don't see more visitors. If you go a little bit farther down the list,
go into like
there are a lot of gems that are near,
easy to get to.
Yeah, easy to get
Very
to.
cool.
Might be quite close to where you live, and I mean, it might not be Yosemite. Nothing is Yosemite. I mean, you can't compare. You can't compare places. No. It's just like.
But there's some good ideas for you in there. Some stuff that maybe you hadn't considered before.
Absolutely.
And maybe is, makes sense with some upcoming travel plans.
Yeah. We recommend all of them.
Yeah.
There's not a one that isn't worth a visit.
We should do another episode on those ones. The ones that like might actually fit into an existing travel plan. These ones all probably won't fit into an existing travel plan. With the maybe exception of Great Basin.
Yeah. But anyway.
And North Cascades.
Yeah. So, yeah. Although the national parks are seeing record visitation, there are still plenty that are getting very, very few visitors overall.
A lot of them are still chill.
Yeah.
Anyways, there you go. There's some thoughts. Hopefully you found this useful or interesting in some way.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you to our sponsor, LL Bean, and we'll catch you next time.